He's running against a man who is an existential threat. Donald Trump is a plague on the American conscience and the American nation.
They want men to pretend that they're feminine. They don't want an election. They got so offended by freedom that they just try killing the president. I used to think that the woke were misguided, but now I can see that
Donald Trump is an existential threat that the antidote, to whom the antidote is Joe Biden.
I thought you valued how everyone feels. Then why are y'all celebrating an attempted assassination like you're part of Antifa? Thank God the left can't aim. Thank God the right don't riot. Welcome to the home of the brave.
I think that Donald Trump is the most grave threat that we will face to our democracy in our lifetime.
Can't we just shoot straight? Y'all are going insane. Bitch, you missed. There's no one else you can blame. Tried to lock him up in a cage. Now you trying to kill what you hate. Bitch, you missed.
We have to make the case Donald Trump does continue to pose an existential threat to our democracy.
Millions of people are hooked on amphetamines. They're making billions on untested remedies. Borders are open to people with felonies. Biden can't stop them. He don't have the energy. Y'all want to kill the man trying to fight for a better tomorrow by making him Kennedy?
Trump is a existential, urgent threat to our
Y'all are
democracy.
exactly as crazy as every conservative person I know said you were all along. When a protest, go hard. When a burn flags go off. But y'all are so triggered that you're pulling triggers.
Donald Trump cannot be president again. He's an existential threat to the democracy.
Freedom ain't afraid of violence. You wish you was dying? Bitch, you missed. Thank God the left can't aim. Why can't we just shoot
We
straight?
got to focus on the greatest threat to American democracy that we have ever seen, and that is in Donald Trump.
To lock him up in a cage. Now you trying to kill what you hate. Bitch, you missed.
What's going on, everyone? Matic here, and I think this is going to be a spicy video. So the purpose of this video is mostly to show people on just how close as a country we came to things being far worse than what people might think they are, regardless of anyone on any side might want to acknowledge. So the filming of this is July 20th, a full week after the attempt on President Trump's life. 2 people were critically injured, and another man unfortunately lost his life. We are not going to be concentrating on any of the things that did, maybe, or could have happened that allowed this incident to occur. We are mostly going to concentrate on the actual shooter himself, who I will not name, but I will wind up calling Four-Eyed Sakura, because that's not a 4-head, that's an 8-head. So what do we mostly know about this individual? For one, what we know of, he used an AR-15 styled rifle that was reportedly purchased around 11 years ago from a gun store, gun shop that is not in business anymore. So from that information, we can probably make a few assumptions about what the type of rifle he might have had. Reportedly, the rifle that he used was a DPMS rifle, and around 11 years ago, there was still popularity of getting the classic M4 or M16 style rifle, which mostly means it could have had anywhere from a 14.5, 16, or even possibly an 18-inch barrel. We do not currently know at the moment because I have tried looking for pictures of the rifle. So far, none have come to light. So again, we can only do this based off assumptions. Also, if it was styled after the classic M16, M4 style AR, the handguard on it would not have been a free float handguard, which, for those that shoot, know that a free float handguard actually helps with barrel accuracy. Therefore, it could have had a what we call a clamshell barrel shroud or handguard. And having this style of handguard actually makes the rifle more inaccurate compared to today's ARs that usually try to shoot somewhere between 1 to 2 MOA, which basically means at 100 yards, if you're pointing at a single spot, and you fire off a grouping of rounds, anywhere from 3 to 5, possibly even 10 rounds, all those rounds should land either within 1 inch of each other or possibly 2 inches. Mostly any AR-15 that had a clamshell style handguard, because there is pressure from the receiver onto the barrel itself, would make the gun on average be anywhere from 3 to 4 MOA, which roughly at 100 yards, if you were to aim directly in the center, right between someone's eyes, you would have a shooting area basically from eye to eye if you aim directly in the middle. And that's quite a bit of deviation. And just so people know, that is a military acceptable standard, which basically just goes to show that something that is military grade does not mean the best. Usually the civilian market, regards to almost anything, is going to have a higher standard, more precision, and a far more critical customer base in the civilian market versus whatever government might be. Now, also supposedly, again, more information has came out about this event over the course of this past week, and some of this information is pretty wild. But supposedly the day before or the morning of, Four-Eyed Sakura wound up going to the gun range. And when he had gone and never really came back home, supposedly his parents called law enforcement saying, hey, we don't know where our son is. He's supposed to be here. So while he was at the range, we can again assume that he was getting in practice, because it's also reported that the morning of the incident of July 13th, he purchased 50 rounds of ammunition. What particular brand or quality of the ammo, we don't know at this current moment. But we can surmise that while he was at the range, he was getting in practice. And if he had an optic system, which we don't know of yet, he was most likely sighting it in, making sure that it is correct for the possible ranges that he might be at. Later on during the day of July 13th, before the rally even started, it is reported that Four-Eyed Sakura was at the location with a rangefinder, essentially figuring out just how far he might actually be. Now, from the distance that he was at, it is said that he was roughly about 134 meters, which is anywhere from 145 to 150 yards. From this distance, it would be safe to assume that the iron sights, red dot optic, or potentially magnified optic that the individual might have had, again, we do not know, it would be safe to assume that a classic zeroing distance of 100 yards would be used, although he might have chosen others. So during this recreation, since we have no idea on what kind of actual rifle that he had or ammo that he might have used, therefore I will be saying what exactly I will be using. And we're going to be kind of meeting in the middle of worst off and best case situation. So about right in the middle. So the ammo that we're going to be using is 62 grain 5.56. This is about the middle weight range of a 5.56 caliber. Your lightest is usually about 55 grains, with your heaviest being somewhere between 75 and 77. 62 is a good middle range and will perform almost similarly at this distance that we're doing. It's 150 yards. There's not going to be that much deviation, regardless of which type of ammo that we use. For the rifle we will be using this amalgamation Frankenstein that we have here. And so again, roughly about 11 years ago, classic barrel length for especially a DPMS rifle would have been somewhere between about a 14.5, 16, or roughly about a 20-inch barrel. This is a 13.7 pin and welded with a suppressor on it. So we're actually reaching close to about 16 inches, right about here. So the loss of velocity, as you get a shorter barrel, you do lose velocity or speed in your bullet, which affects how accurate at distance you can be. So our velocity will be slightly negligible. I'll be using an EOTech optic. It is essentially a holographic red dot sight. There will be no magnification. Again, we're meeting ourselves in the middle. I don't have iron sights on this, although we'll have a picture here of what the target we will be aiming at would look like under iron sights at the distance we're at. The distance we will be firing at is 130 to 135 yards. That's kind of the longest I can do and still be safe within the area that I'm at. And if you go back and look at the video of the incident, you'll see that roughly about 3 shots happen within about a second and a half, maybe 3-second time period before Trump drops down. And at that point, multiple rounds are fired after that. What we can surmise from that is supposedly before any shots were taken, Four-Eyed Sakura had positioned himself on a sloped roof aiming towards President Trump, and a police officer had tried to climb up on top of the roof to check to see who was up there. And when it happened, Four-Eyed Sakura turned around, pointed his rifle at the officer, and the officer either quickly got down or fell off of the roof, possibly injuring himself reportedly. And then he turned back, and then reports say after a certain amount of time, we'll use a certain amount of time to be roughly about 10 seconds for him to try to get a sight on President Trump. Fire around, he see that it didn't happen. He then fired a second, third shot. That's when Trump got down. And at that point, based on certain schematics and where other people were hit as well, it can be assumed that at that point, the individual just started shooting rounds until his 8 head just turned into a canoe. So what we're going to do to try to simulate as many of these factors as possible, I'm going to do roughly about 20 to 30 kettlebell swings, I believe, with a 35-pound kettlebell. Afterwards, and hopefully after I get my cameras and stuff set up, I will try to give myself 10 seconds to prop myself onto the... I don't have a sloped roof because apparently they're very dangerous, but I do have a slightly sloped hood on my truck, and I will be balancing the rifle on my hood with this standard capacity magazine. So that will induce a little bit of instability along with an elevated heart rate and the pressure to try to get this shot off quickly before someone tries to stop me. I'll also only give myself 3 rounds in order to do this, simulating again when Trump dropped down, essentially immediately Secret Service was on top of him. Now, what exactly will the target be? Well, this. For democracy. Starting 10. Camera. So we got torn there. So, entrance and an exit. Is that the only one? Looks like it, but so the water, I guess the water tension is keeping it from coming out the hole. Even that one, which is weird, should be gushing. Whew! All right, that was something. So as you see, I had a little bit of technical difficulties trying to make sure my camera was set up on target. So that cost me a little bit more of the 10 seconds that I wanted to allow myself in between when the officer would have seen me or I threatened him, and then to when I started shooting. But it's probably within like our margin of error of when shots actually started firing because they're not very specific. Now, when it comes to the actual shooting and hitting of the target, so just like, or what we assume, the first shot of the shooter is the one that hit Trump's ear when he tilted his head, which is pretty much the only thing that saved him. The first shot is suspected to be the one that grazed his ear. After the third shot is when he ducked down. Now, my third shot didn't get off until about the 4-second mark, somewhere around there. But just like with the shooter, my first shot made contact, and I did not expect to have a pressure system be involved, which I kind of should have. But so I wasn't sure that my first round actually hit, and I was fully expecting this to just go boom. Probably if I used different rounds, something like that, that's the effect that I would have gotten. Instead, I was using 62 grain full metal jackets, which means it's basically just going to go right into the target, and after a certain distance, then create all of the damage that you're usually looking for when it comes to bullets. But you can see here, and also in the slow-mo footage, we entered here on the edge. So I think my zero is probably a little to the left, out to that distance. My setup has a 36-yard zero, and I'd need to do more confirmation out at distance. It's just really hard to do in my area. But so we hit this corner here, and it actually came out on the other side of the corner, and mostly because the cap was on, it created a vacuum, so nothing was spilling out. And so, like the shooter, I followed up with another 2 rounds. I limited just to 3 because after 3 is about when Trump ducks down. Everything after that was just a complete and utter disregard for anybody else that was at that facility, never mind the initial act in the first place. Now, from that, I was essentially holding as much as possible right on the very bottom of this target and as much in the middle as I could, and I was still off about an inch and a half or so. So imagine that so we're almost within a margin of error, and I'm pretty sure my zero is slightly off. Add another ½ inch and then a tilt, and that would have been a missed shot, just like on what happened with Trump. So he was extremely very lucky. And I hope that he continues to have that luck, because if anybody within this certain time on either side is taken out by anyone, regardless of who does it, regardless of who it's done to, it would be incredibly detrimental to our current American society. And we really don't need that. We need to be as civil about everything as possible. So the funny thing is, this is probably, I have shot out to 100 yards or even close to that less than 10 times, and this one included. Four-eyed Soccer, on the other hand, either he was the worst shooter on his high school shooting club, or he was so bad that he couldn't even get on the team. Depending on your sources, it's either or. And also considering that he went to the range the day before or that morning, he probably had considerably more practice out to distance than I did. So again, it is incredibly lucky that he got as close as he did with his aim, and we are lucky that he missed due to Trump shaking his head just slightly less than Jay Leno does. So again, the purpose of this video was to show on just how close we came as a country in and of itself to things going incredibly badly, regardless of who's the blame for it happening. If it happened on the other side, it would still be absolutely terrible. If it happens on another side, it's still absolutely terrible. And already there are people who are using this incident to push for gun control. And all that I personally have to say to people who are using the incident last week to try to push for gun control, and for anybody that might use any of the footage from this to try to push for gun control, get wrecked. And while I or anybody else shouldn't tell you on who you should vote for, whichever side it happens to be, let me at least leave you with this. Maybe the side that is not trying to make it more difficult for you to protect either yourself, your family, your friends, or your community. They might not be the good guys because of nuance and people are people, but I'm pretty sure they're not the bad guys. The side that wants you to be able to protect yourself from bad individuals to bad organizations, the side that wants you to be able to defend yourself in the most effective and efficient way possible, is probably the side to root for. If for nothing else, you can always defend yourself from them. I'm Matic, and our regular scheduled programming will be right back in the next video. I'll see y'all later.